Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the show. What if technology actually made our lives better instead of worse? When you're scrolling nonstop on your phone, do you ever feel like you're at the casino? If you've ever opened 200 tabs on your browser, stared blankly into a screen, or doom-scrolled the day away, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Modern computers and smartphones are evolutionarily mismatched to our biology. Algorithms have been weaponized against us, using our attention as a currency for advertisers and top-down social agendas. As a result, our use of modern phones, tablets, computers, and social media have led to increasing depression, anxiety, and social isolation. So why would you create a new tablet computer that's heavier, thicker, lacks color, and has no camera or microphone? Because it's actually better for you. We're here today with Anjan Katta, founder of Daylight Computer. Daylight Computer aims to create devices that respect our health, attention, and freedom, challenging tech giants like Apple, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. By prioritizing simplicity, honesty, and ethics, the next generation of founders is creating devices that are less likely to be addictive or harmful. In this episode, we explore why modern blue lit devices and screens are so addictive, how artificial blue light alters our production of dopamine and disrupts our circadian rhythm, why surveillance resistant devices are the way of the future, the potential for innovative technology to enhance rather than detract from our well being, and much more. Let's go hang out with Anjan. All right, welcome back, folks. Anjan Katta is the visionary founder and inventor behind Daylight Computer, a groundbreaking hardware technology company that has created the world's very first blue light-free, high refresh rate computer. Driven by a vision to create a healthier, more humane computing ecosystem, Daylight embodies Anjan's belief in the potential for technology to enhance rather than detract from our well-being. Daylight's mission is to offer devices that respect our health, attention, and freedom, paving the way for a future where technology supports a more balanced and fulfilling life. Anjan, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you, Abel. It's so cool to meet in person and have this come about organically. And now we're doing it.
I loved hanging out with you guys in Austin. It's pretty rare that you get to meet people who are starting up health tech companies and trying to take on the big behemoths to actually make technology that isn't destroying our health actively. Maybe we can start right there because you kind of have a bit of history with that, and this came from a place of suffering and pain in your own life. And I think a lot of us can relate to the fact that modern technology isn't necessarily making our lives or certainly our health that much better when we're suffering with, mental health issues, physical health issues, distracted, addicted. Our sleep is suffering. We have eye strain, all these things. So maybe you can get in and just start right there. Like, where did Daylight Computer and the idea for it actually come from?
Right. And if you don't mind me making just a quick snide comment about the taking on the behemoths, we once had an investor who heard our pitch. They never invested in us, but they were like, wait. So you are making something that's a healthier iPad. So you're taking on Apple. You're making something that's like fully privacy and sovereign. So you're like blocking out Google and their tracking and all that stuff. Um, you're trying to make it about non-addicting, non-distracting things. So you're blocking Instagram and so Facebook and TikTok and so on. And then you're competing against the Kindle. And then you could argue another tablet, the Microsoft Surface. So you're taking on also Amazon, Microsoft. He's like, the hell is wrong with you guys? Do you understand the combined market cap of everybody you're trying to piss off? And I was like, that's exactly the point. Somebody's got to do this. Um,
Well, I salute you, my friend.
and maybe that's how it relates is I don't think there's a way to rationally decide to do this. I don't think you're going to work backwards from a business plan. I don't think you're going to work backwards from who's going to give you money, which investor would be interested. The odds of doing this are frankly just so slim. The difficulty of competing with these guys, even though I think we're not competing, you're not trying to offer what they're offering. You're going somewhere different. Um, is difficult, and the resources required to do this. There's very few new computer companies. You could argue the last new computer company was over a dozen years ago in Oculus. Like this is a once in a decade type thing, and so they're precious, they're fragile, they're hard to get off the ground, they're hard to sustain. And I think if you don't come from a place of your own personal struggle, if you don't come from a place of wow that hurt, I think it's just so hard to sustain it. And I think it's hard to do it in a way that's holistic and whole. Um, and so for me, a lot of my motivation comes from that desperation when you're just like, you can't see how life gets better. Like I just had this paralyzing thought. I'm very ADHD. The way you can tell is you go on my computer, there's 400 tabs. The way you can tell is you tell me to do something before you know it. You're like, wait, why are you like removing Groupon emails in your inbox? Like, like that. I intend to do something, and then a computer takes me in another way. And at some level, you just start second guessing yourself deeply, right? Like you don't trust yourself. Like I'm going to do something doesn't mean you will do it. And so between intention and action, between what you want to do and what happens, that gap really eats away at your soul, eats away at your sense of self-worth, your agency. And I just couldn't imagine like that every job and every career would involve a computer screen in some fashion. Most of them in a 8 to 10 hours to 12 hours a day fashion. And I was like, holy crap, I'm going to ace the interview because I think I'm such a charming soul. And then I'm going to be frozen in my chair when I think about the fact that they're going to assign me something. I'm going to sit there and I know what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend 2 hours on ESPN. And I'm going to let them down so badly. And that feeling of regardless of what I do or how good I am, I'm always going to be undermined by this damn computer thing. There's no way in the modern world as a knowledge worker to have a career without a computer being in the middle. And that was such a terrifying thought. And it felt so hopeless. I felt like I needed to do something. And I tried every tool that was out there. It didn't really work. And so the honest truth was I started creating this to make a healthier, distraction-free, less addicting, not screwing up your all aspects of your being, your self-worth computer. So I had some sense of hope.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of other addictive things where it's like, why would the business model ever be to make your device or your thing less addictive? But it can work. We kind of have proof of concept in other worlds, like mocktails and near beers, zero alcohol beers taking off in the past few years, whereas before that really wasn't a thing or everyone made fun of it. These days, I think if we're honest about our relationship with our computers, we ask ourselves, has our behavior gotten better? Has our mental and physical state gotten better because of it? Even like thinking back to when, you and I were kids, that type of technology, looking into even like old school tube screens, the analog stuff, even if it was kind of uh, in the digital realm, wasn't nearly as distracting as what we have now. And for me, I always used to make fun of other people who had all these tabs open and all these unread emails and all the other things like that. And skip ahead 5 years later or whatever, I'm in the same mess as everyone else. Like I can't. I'm running away from myself on the computer and going down these rabbit holes, and it's becoming more and more addictive and more difficult to actually use your computer as a tool as opposed to being, you know, basically a slave to the algorithm or a slave to the machine.
I love the phrase you just said, running away from yourself. I think like it's easy to call it addiction or distraction, but really what it is it's a tool of taking advantage of every time you're slightly not present. Yeah, word blocked. I want to run away from myself. Like, oh my God, what if this thing I'm writing is not good? What if I pick the wrong way to do it? I'm going to run away from myself. I can pretend like I'm not in reality. I can pretend that doesn't exist because I'm just eating dopamine for, the next 45 minutes on YouTube. And I think that is a powerful reframe because you start to look at it and see it's not a technology thing. It's like a psychology and mental health and like physical health because implicated thing. And engineers, like to work backwards from supply chain. They like to work backwards from Star Trek. Right? They like to work backwards from these visions of the future. And there's something humble but necessary of saying, I'm going to work from my personal problems. I'm going to work from health, from mental health, from the actual bottom up reality of my life.
So for people, I mean, a lot of the listeners are familiar with the dangers of blue light, but I think it's worth going over that just briefly. Why is blue light in every single device that's, in front of us, from phones, tablets, computers, ambient lighting, and all the rest of it? And why are you staying away from it? What does blue light actually do to us?
Right. Um, Once again, the frame here was I had a shitty relationship with computers. How do I make a computer that doesn't have the same physical health impacts, the mental health impacts, and doesn't spy on me? Like, just kind of remove all the shitty negative parts of the computer. And even if there are some trade offs, hopefully what's left, even if it's a little bit boring, is actually, good for you, or it can allow a better version of yourself versus the shitty version of yourself eating Doritos, on the toilet at 2 a.m. doom scrolling. And a key part of that is the physical health part. And I think what people don't understand is how deeply connected your physical and mental health are. If you don't have your metabolism running the right way, if your circadian rhythms aren't running the right way, if you're not sleeping well, if your dopamine systems are downregulated, that's really going to drive a lot of that running away from yourself, that distraction, that anxiety, that avoidance, that addiction. And so, um, I was really stunned to see that a lot of what I thought were purely mental were caused by the physical. And one of the biggest physical ones was blue light. And so the kind of punchline is blue light confuses the hell out of your body, which leads to all sorts of internal chaos. Um, and when there's chaos inside the body, we call that inflammation. And a lot of the quote unquote like problems of the modern world, you could say, are inflammatory or autoimmune in nature. And the key implication here is like blue light and circadian rhythms and this kind of internal confusion of the body is one key perpetrator of that. And so there's folks like Jack Kruse and others out there, Alexander Wunsch and the Salk Institute and all this science of circadian rhythms of holy crap, this might be one of the main ways modern humans are extremely unhealthy. And before I get into the specifics of why blue light's bad or this or that, there's these like, just to give you a quick like framing for why this is so important. There's all this like nutrition research. Are carbs good for you? Are carbs bad for you? Da 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 da. And all these scientists were trying to like study hunter gatherers. Do they eat carbs? Is this in a human's ancestral diet? Is this what we're evolved for, or is it all meat and plants and this? And they were so confused because they would meet some hunter-gatherer societies that ate a shit ton of carbs and they didn't have insulin resistance and they didn't gain a lot of weight. And they're like, what the heck is going on? And the key breakthrough was when someone was like, oh my God, sunlight, they're outdoors all the time. And then the big thing is like carbs in the winter are there to help your hibernation or before winter. And so, of course, your body wants to gain weight when you take carbs because it is one of the main ways in which you're able to bulk up. And mammals hibernate. But in the spring and summer, carbs are some of the fastest, like the best fuel for energy and expansion and so on. And so actually your relationship to how carbs impact you depends on your lighting environment. The less light you have, the more dark, the more replication of a cave, i.e. being indoors, the more it is bulking you up. The more you are outdoors, the more it is a fuel source for you to go hunting or gathering or whatever it may be. And so like the key insight there was it wasn't are carbs bad or good, it's what's your lighting environment. And that's like the holy shit moment because it's like, wow, like so many potential contradictions and misunderstandings of modern health could be better understood by like understanding the ways we're dependent on nature. And light is one key way we're dependent on nature. And so the light from the sun is full spectrum. If like a rainbow, you get like Roy G. Biv. It's got red, it's got orange, it's got yellow, it's got green, it's got blue, it's got indigo, it's got violet, it's got ultraviolet, which is invisible light that is so violet you can't even see it anymore. And it's got infrared, which is invisible light that is so red you can't even see it anymore. Right. And it turns out those things are also important and useful because they're part of the natural world. We evolved with them always being there. Outside of a solar eclipse or a volcano covering the earth in dust, the sun always shows up. And then some biology deeply entrained to it. And what happens is when there is the blue in the sunlight, it peaks at around like noon or 1 p.m. And so in the natural world, when you get a high dose of blue light, it's because it's noon or 1 p.m. And that's just like, that doesn't change. That doesn't matter if you're in Djibouti. That doesn't matter if you're in Athens. That doesn't matter if you're in Caracas. Like, if you get this particular spectrum of the sun where it's a lot of blue light, it is 1 p.m. The sunrise starts at being very red shifted. It's mostly red, very little blue. And as it gets to the high point of the day, the apex, then it's very blue. And then as it gets to sunset, it starts to red shift again. And so the sun spectrum changes over time. So our devices, they just give you, like, because of the white LED, they just give you like a huge blue peak. To your point, this wasn't necessarily the case before LEDs were invented. This is, flat panel displays and phones and laptops are uniquely possible because of LEDs, because they can fit in those small sizes. But LEDs also have this big blue peak. And I'll explain in a second why that's the case, because you asked that. And so it basically just confuses the shit out of your body, because for all of human history, when you got a blue peak, it's like, boys and girls, it's 1 p.m. Let's get that like insulin going. Let's get out there, because that's when you're doing stuff, right? But right now it's 9 p.m. Let's say it's 9 p.m. You're doing some emails. You got work tomorrow. You're just trying to catch up. You're getting smashed with blue light in the face, because that's what your iPad or iPhone or MacBook or Windows PC is producing. And so your body is sitting there being like, well, nature never lies. It's 1 p.m. But your growth hormone is like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm like 2 hours from secreting, right? And then your pancreas is like, wait, what am I doing? I was going to put some glucagon down. Like, I thought we are going to sleep. Like, and all your parts of your body are now in chaos. Like, what the heck is going on? Because it turns out a clock is one of, like, nature's greatest functions for enabling coordination at massive scale. And a body, even though it's small, is a massive scale in terms of the number of things, right? Like, if your watch says something different than mine, different from the train conductor, good luck catching a train in London. Like, you're going to miss the train. You use the clock so you all can show up at the platform at the same time that the train has to leave. It's the same thing with the body. And when you buy a new, a new laptop, it'll say, Intel i5, 3 gigahertz, right? Like, guess what the gigahertz is? A gigahertz is the speed of the computer's clock. It 3 billion times per second ticks versus a normal clock, which will go 60. And on each of those ticks, everything does an action. Like, it synchronizes. Okay, on this next tick, you guys are going to add. On this next tick, you're going to multiply. And so whether it's a computer or whether it's a body, there's this deep coordination around clocks. And that's literally the gigahertz. And so our body similarly also has these clocks on hour-long cycles, on day-long cycles, on moon cycles, on all these different time periods. And because we're squishy beings, these clocks kind of drift. They slightly, it's like, I have like a cheap Casio watch. After a year, like, it's off by a minute or two, it drifts. And clearly over time, like a train tracks, if you keep letting that go more and more and more, you're going to be further and further from reality. So what biology does is it entrains. So every day you drift, and every day it sees the sun and says, oh, okay, with this spectrum, it must be 8 a.m. Oh, with this spectrum, it must be 1 p.m. And it comes back, and it drifts, and it comes back. And this is how, like, nature survives. It's this constant drifting and this constant coming back. It's called entrainment. And you basically deeply screw up the body when it's like 11 p.m. or 9 p.m. and you give it all this blue light that says it's 1 p.m. And it's like, what the heck? And so there's actually a lot of ways that blue light affects you. It downregulates your dopamine system. It affects your insulin and glucose response. It affects, Jack Cruz can tell me all the ways that I'm describing it badly versus him. But, the deuterium ratio in water, the impact in your metabolism through your mitochondria. And so there's a huge basket of it. But one of the big ones is this kind of internal chaos and confusion. And really, all we're trying to say is, oopsie, we didn't know this until recently. So whoever made these technologies, they didn't know this. It's not their fault. But in a way, society gets stuck and locked in. And it turns out the white LED is the most power efficient versus all of them. And a white LED is literally just a blue LED with some stuff on top of it. And why do we use a blue LED? Well, it turns out a blue LED is just way more power efficient than a red or a green. There's actually a beautiful video by Veritasium on YouTube where he talks about the massive monumental effort it was to invent the first blue LED. They invented green a long time, and then they invented red, and it took a long time to do blue. So it's kind of hilarious that this, like, massive triumph, because the blue enables white light, which then enabled LEDs to be useful, was also like the thing that's hurting us now, right? And there's just something about like the thing that helped us often is the thing that hurts us. And then to the Einstein quote, like the consciousness that got us here is not going to get us there. Um, and so the analogy would be here, like, these blue, white LEDs got us here. They're not going to get us there. And that's what we're trying to do. I don't think we're trying to be um, clever in any particular way. I think we're just trying to stare biology in its face and work backwards from that rather than working backwards from supply chain or engineering. Or if you're a VP in Apple, geez, well, we can't sell 100 million iPhones where we pay 3 cents more for a different LED that's reduces battery life by 30 minutes. Like, right, they don't have the institutional imperative, but we can, because we're like, health matters so much. We're willing to have 30 minutes less of battery life. We're willing to have the product be $50 more expensive, right? We might be wrong. Maybe people are not willing to spend money for their health, but our whole company is a bet that it's worth spending money on your health, and that these guys are too cynical about that.
Well, if you look at Apple and a lot of the other technology companies that release devices, aside from VR headsets and maybe even including VR headsets, there really hasn't been that much innovation in a long time. Since the first iPhone, like if you look at what's on it now, yeah, there are some apps and there are way more cameras than we need. There is still not excellent battery life. Like it's functionally very similar to the first or second or third generation, whatever. But um, as I've measured some of the devices and some of the radiation coming off in the past few years, it just continues to skyrocket. And at some point, we do need to acknowledge that our time on computers is maybe not so good for us. I remember growing up and they're just like, get off the TV. You're going to turn into an idiot. You're going to start slobbering soon. And that kind of went out the window during the pandemic years when we were all forced to be on our computers. And then a lot of things started happening virtually more and more. Yet, I've heard you talk about Kindle a little bit. Maybe you can touch on this because I got my first Kindle maybe 3 or 4 years ago, which doesn't have the blue light in the screen if that backlight is turned off, right? And so you can kind of go outside and use that. And I found that um, I can't really read with good comprehension on a computer or a phone. On a Kindle, it's much, much better, closer to a book. And it's a lot harder to get things done and stay focused when you're staring into a blue screen compared to that sort of experience. So what was it about the Kindle that kind of made that different to you, or what was your experience like when you compared your productivity or your focus on that type of device compared to a normal Apple computer or a laptop, something like that.
And if you don't mind me just starting by asking you a question, why do you think your comprehension was better on it? Like, what do you think you think that was guessable up front, or is it only like the proof's in the pudding? Only when you use it, you're like, whoa, I don't know why. It's just, I guess I'm asking a bit of a leading question, but
I love it. It's because it's closer to paper. It's closer to the analog experience. Like I've been writing books and writing songs and a lot of other things for a long time, and I always prefer for the ideas to come out when I'm outside writing analog on an old school journal. And so I think part of it is as well, if I'm reading um, on a daylight computer, tablet, or a Kindle, I can actually be doing it outside. So maybe part of it is just my comprehension and productivity and focus is better when I'm in full spectrum light as opposed to being tethered indoors to some sort of computer that's hooked up to something, or by virtue of its screen you can't really take it outdoors and see through the glare that's on there on a normal laptop. So I suspect it's something about that where I don't my brain doesn't have to work so hard to take that lamp that I'm staring into and turn it into words in my head, as opposed to using, old school analog technology or something like a daylight computer or a Kindle.
right. Yeah, I think you nailed it. Like, you can be top down and work backwards from the principles of circadian biology, from light, from nature, from proof of work, from all these kind of like top down conceptual ways. But I think you actually end up with basically the same answer if you just work up in a bottom up way. If you notice your experience on something like a Kindle or on a moleskin or a printed piece of paper, and you're like, wow, I can understand better. I can read better. I can focus better. My eyes don't hurt. I just comprehend better, right? Like, And then you're just like, okay, what is the properties of this thing that makes it as such? And a Kindle is a reflective paper-like screen. And our whole technology is the Kindle is limited in actually being able to do computery stuff. You can't do email in it. You can't do ChatGPT. You can't do Google Docs. You can't put sheet music. You can't do PDFs, or you can't at least do double column PDFs or so on, because the screen is too slow. And so reflective paper-like screens have just been this small niche, just meant for reading Harry Potter and 50 Shades of Grey through the Kindle. Our question was like, well, what if we unniche this? And that's why we had to invent our own screen technology to create an evolution. We call it ours live paper, but like the hope was live paper is e-ink, but at the speed of an iPad, you know, and it's almost like the ink is alive. That's kind of why we called it that, and jumping around. And to your point, yeah, it's basically an analog object. It's like trying to make an analog computer. That's our whole vibe. And the first product's a tablet. We're going to come up with a phone, a laptop, a monitor, a whiteboard, a drafting table, a watch, who knows? But all of it is basically making the most analog computer you possibly can. If you ever watched Harry Potter, I always think of the newspaper with Sirius Black screaming on it. That's an analog computer,
Yeah.
right? The portraits on the walls of the people and they're slightly moving, that's an analog computer. The Marauders map, that's an analog computer. They're analog form factors, but they're doing, animated, digital, magical things. And to me, that's what a computer is. It's giving animism. It's animating. It's giving life to an object.
Yeah, and, I'll shift gears a little bit because, I was so grateful to get an early version of your tablet to experiment with music and, specifically and for writing. And for me, I've always struggled to bring creativity to the typical computer setup. Like I said, I always prefer the analog thing. And one way that kind of shifted or manifested over the years. I always used to bring these big old binders full of, sheet music and lyrics, chords, and it was a complete mess and not really practical to gig that way or like go out in the world that way. Or if you lose your binder, you're in deep trouble. Whereas, the conveniences of the modern internet where you can look up songs or store your own songs or what have you that way, much more convenient. And so most musicians, whether they're in a pit or they're up on stage, at some point they're reading something from a phone or more often a tablet. But especially if you're performing at night, which many people do, um, you're staring into the blue screen of death for your entire gig and you're being bathed in all of this artificial light from the lights on stage. This is happening at night, the worst possible thing for you. And so it's one of the reasons I got away from music and kind of stopped playing gigs that way because I realized that it was wrecking my health. And that was obvious in my biomarkers, it was obvious in the way that I felt. Whereas experimenting with the daylight computer, to your point, the Kindle can't do this. I've really enjoyed reading books on the Kindle. I've tried doing a few other things that it can kind of technically do on there, but it's not really useful as a productivity tool. It's just kind of like a little reading gizmo, which is all well and good. But what makes the daylight computer tablet so much different is that you have the stylus that brings the analog experience to a really powerful form of technology. So I started writing songs like the old school with a pen type of way, and then reading off of that instead of typed lyrics. And that experience of reading your own writing back, whether it's poetry, prose, songs, chords, sheet music, is a fundamentally different thing than looking at a Google Doc where it's all just some sort of Arial typeface or sans serif or whatever it is. It doesn't feel as human. And so the combination of the lighting, the fact that it's not stealing your attention and distracting you, and you have that like kind of old school analog experience of the feel of the screen, the lack of that annoying glare and reflectivity, the speed at which you can use the stylus and zoom in, zoom out, kind of manipulate things, move it around, or even watch a video. Um, it's it's incredible. I was kind of like speechless the first time that I tried it, because I was like, I've been thinking I've needed this for decades. Like the other stuff has been destroying my creativity and productivity. I mean, it's amazing that we can do this and have podcasts and things like that. But it would be so much better if my monitor right now were made by you folks because it would fundamentally change the experience and I think make it a lot more human.
If you ever find yourself accidentally in San Francisco, we should just pretend your name is Anjan and I'll put you in front of some investors and maybe you can help us raise enough money to make that monitor a reality. You described it better than
Done.
I could.
I'll take
That's
15%.
amazing. Deal. It means the world for you to have the reaction you did, because I guess it's a bit of a corny line, but I think it really captures it. That I say there's something both ironic and absolutely necessary that a company named Daylight was built in the shadows for 6 years. Um, and
Right.
you have no idea whether anybody's going to find this useful or like it or this or that. So it means the world for you to have the experience you've had. And I'm sure there's flaws and there's things we can improve. And it's definitely a sign of love to be able to communicate that as well. So I hope the things that aren't working out so well we can improve. And this is a genuine one. So just imagine in a couple of years where we'll be able to take this. It's only up from here. So.
Well, I love the fact that you guys aren't trying to make the most sexy computer out there. You're not trying to make it thinner or add another camera on there or like all of these kind of useless bells and whistles that are there more for the centralized system or the corporations themselves than the end user, because it's really turned into this thing where computing started off as a tool, kind of like it evolved from the typewriter, which I went back to for a period of time because I'm like, I know that my productivity is trashed, and so I've tried using that a few times and really enjoyed it. But most of the innovation that we've seen in the past few years from these big computer companies don't improve the user experience in hardly any way. In fact, it's built on exploitation. It's built on getting you to spend more time in the app store where they take 30% from all these garbage apps that eat up your time, or spend more time scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, spend more time on all of the devices has been the point. Whereas that's not why we got into this. That's not why we originally bought these machines. And so I am thrilled by the fact that there are boring computers starting to come out that we can actually use again. And I don't mind that it's maybe not quite as skinny or as light as some of the other computing devices that we have out there, because I've been deeply unsatisfied with almost every single gadget purchase that I've made in the past 10 plus years. Like maybe it's a little bit faster, but it's barely even worth it to like port your hard drive over again and do all this other stuff. But even more than that, what we need, I think, for productivity is not to open 500 tabs. And I've never once like felt like doing that while using the daylight computer. It's more like, oh, you're here. This is on the screen. Let's deal with this. Whether you're watching something, you're reading something, you're writing something, um, or just kind of like surfing the web, it becomes more like reading a newspaper in a really cool way, where you just don't really feel like opening up 3 pages at a time or 50 pages at a time. Whereas pretty much all of the modern browsers are built for that. And it's infuriating. It's nuts because I can't stop doing it. Like you and a lot of other people just find that it keeps happening.
Oh man, if you don't mind, I have like a response to that and also a question for you. Uh,
Yeah, please.
I think the response is I think you've nailed probably one of the core reasons we may succeed and one of the core reasons we may fail. And I think it's the same one, which is we're not cynical about people. I think we fail because people are like, but it doesn't have a 60 megapixel camera, but it's not so skinny. Oh my God, the bezels are big, right? And in the existing frame that you're taught to analyze things were analyzed. And people are like, well, you failed all those tests. And then therefore they don't buy our thing. I think that if one of the reasons we may fail is because we're too optimistic. And actually that cynical take is a good read of what the world is. On the other hand, I think if we do succeed, it's because of people like yourself who are like, fuck your pandering. I don't give a shit that the camera is 64 megapixels or the bezel's a little bit smaller. Like, stop trying to say all these things matter to me, so I'll buy your iPhone 12 or they're always trying to send you the new version. Like, why don't you fucking make a difference in the things that actually matter? And there's an optimism there that you're not going to analyze it based on the existing thing, that you're like, what? It does less. Why would I pay so much money? Like, you're looking at it in a new way, which is, whoa, like, of course, I'm willing to trade off a bunch to prioritize my health or prioritize my peace of mind or my ability to focus. Like, that matters so much more. And so we've been like trying to come up with some like slogans that can capture this philosophical difference. We're like a computer that does less so you can do more. um, you know, taking the color out of the screen and putting it back into your life. Like there's something about the computer being less And so your effectiveness is more. And so much of the current paradigm is look how much the computer is. And we get soul sucked in the process of it. And so I think that's kind of cool.
Super cool. And it's time for a more approach that embraces minimalism. Like one of the things that my wife noticed as well, when I brought the daylight computer home for the first time, it's like, wait, is there a microphone on here? Like, can I record voice notes if I want to? It looks like there's no microphone and there's no video. And then I'm like, wait, that's great because now I don't have to be surveilled all the time. I don't need to be advertised to when I walk into someone else's house and they have like some piece of technology that somehow pinged another piece of technology that was sold to someone that then follows me around the internet for the next 6 months. Like, no, they can't follow us around. They are not listening because this device is a productivity tool that doesn't allow that. And that is a different type of freedom than most of us have experienced in a long time, where we kind of gave up, right? We know that other people's phones are listening, that the computers are listening, and all these ad tracking cookies are following us around. And we're just like, I don't know what to do, until you have a device that doesn't do that. And you're like, oh, this is kind of great. Maybe I want to go in this direction. And that goes even farther, right? Where this is kind of on purpose, right? Where you don't want um, Google and all of these other companies that are kind of their business model is built on creeping on people. There's You're trying to enable a way to opt out of that system, and that's becoming its own movement. There have been a lot of meetups in Austin where people are talking about this and building systems to make that possible. And I would wholeheartedly embrace that because we have been a product for too long.
Mm, yeah. Oof. I love that phrase. Like we've been a product for too long because I think that's the gaslighting of the modern world is they're like trying to say like we have your best interests in mind. We're trying to make you the best version of yourself. But in all essence, wherever they can get away with it, they're trading you off for their, better earnings to shareholders for the next quarter, and they're gaslighting you. Like, oh, we got. It's like the overbearing mom who says she's doing everything because she loves you, but it's actually because out of her anxiety, right? Like it's actually a selfishness that's masked as selflessness. And maybe I might be projecting a bit and have my personal biases, but yeah, it feels it feels like like, come on, guys, like fuck you, like stop it, like treat us like we're adults, not children. Like I feel like we're treated like children, and marketing assumes you're a child. And like, guess when we talk to like really good marketers as we're trying to learn this, I'm like, I don't want to listen to what you're saying because you're just like, people are fucking stupid. Like, they're so stupid. Like, don't fucking make any assumption that assumes they're smart or they'll listen to something. I'm like, dude, Joe Rogan's stuff is 4 fucking hours. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, look, he gets millions of views, right? Like, stop this baseless bullshit cynicism towards people. And like, I don't care if we fail. I just feel like the world needs attempts that are like, people aren't stupid. They do want to improve their lives. Stop telling them that they want to like piss away their money and gamble away their money and gamble away their time and piss away their time. Like, fuck you. Right? It's hard. It's hard to survive in the modern world. And so I think everything we're doing is downstream of these philosophical choices of minimalism, of less, of intentional constraints, of of strong trade-offs, like and I like what you said. It's almost like Google had this internal motto of "Don't be evil," right? Like don't try to sell ads and do this. It's hilarious how evil they are today, but we're saying, well, the smart person isn't "Don't be evil." There can't be evil. And I think of like Odysseus in the Odyssey, where he didn't try to like don't jump off the boat to get to the sirens. He's like, I can't jump off the boat to go to the sirens. He asked his crew to tie him up to the mast. So regardless of what he wanted, he can't. And so I think about what we're doing is let's not try to don't be evil. That's good intentions. Let's can't be evil. Let's make it such that it doesn't matter if we slip. And what I mean by that is our screen is black and white. Even if we decide like we want to make addicting stuff, like good luck. Like once you've removed the manipulation of color and supernormal stimuli, like good luck. Like it's really hard. Like try, like I don't know if you tried it, but try like TikTok or Instagram on our thing. Like it's actually really hard to get addicted to it. It is boring. And it took me a long time to realize, holy fuck. When YouTube first came out, I remember I would get bored after a bit because the recommended videos you give it are were like kind of like not interesting. But these guys have gotten so fucking good. So good that you forget that they're good because you're just in the flow of it. They've gotten so good. I don't remember the last time where I'm on YouTube and I was going through a recommended rabbit hole. You know, they go to the next one, the autoplay it, where I got bored. Almost every time I have to get off YouTube, it's because I'm like, okay, gotta get off YouTube. It's not like, oh, this video is boring. And I was like, dude, dude, these guys are so powerful. We don't get bored anymore. And we're not saying no TikTok or Instagram. We're not saying like paternalism, right? Fuck, you should say fuck you to that. We're literally just tilting it back into an even table where like sometimes you can be intrigued by content and sometimes you can be bored by it, which is natural. And therefore you don't need to be compulsively in it. And so I think one of the questions I had for you is your version of the tablet is actually running cocaine mode, meaning nothing is blocked on it. Yet it seems interesting. It's a bit tongue in cheek because even in cocaine mode, it seems like it's still way less addicting and way less distracting. Do you have any sense of like why that's the case? Like you were kind of hinting at it a bit. Uh, like what? It's not like YouTube is blocked on yours or TikTok or Instagram's blocked or whatever it may be, but it seems like your behavior is different. Is that fair? And what do you think is different? What causes it?
It's totally fair. Yeah. So the daylight tablet is fundamentally different from that blue screen experience because I don't feel pulled to it. I held up my phone outside and inside next to the daylight tablet, and there's something kind of enchanting and uncomfortable about the blue screen effect. Or even if it's an old Android, doesn't matter if it's a new or old one. This has kind of been similar technology that's been doing this for many years at this point, but it's just not as seductive. The daylight tablet isn't as seductive. It doesn't draw you in. It's more integrated in the actual environment. It doesn't feel like it's outside of nature. And I've heard you talk about this as well, where you're trying to work with the laws of nature, which has been a huge focus of our work for many years, instead of trying to fight the laws of nature and overpower them. And I think modern technology has gotten to the point with through electricity, through LED technology and the advancements there, as well as kind of the casino effect and the hacking of our dopamine and our other brain chemicals, where it's basically turning everything into some sort of addictive slot machine that's on this technology. That magic is taken away when you don't have that super bright light, when you don't have the color. And I think there's something about the surface of the screen as well and its reflectivity and how that works, where my brain looks at the daylight computer and it's like, okay, let's relax a little bit, even if you're doing something that is usually overstimulating the system. For me, it's YouTube videos. I don't use Instagram and haven't for years. I don't really use TikTok and those other newfangled apps. Well, I guess they're kind of old at this point, but the ones that I can tell are encouraging me or its user to scroll, 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 I try to stay away from, with the exception of maybe YouTube, which definitely kind of, it might not be scrolling, but it's a similar effect. But I was watching some videos actually of you and Tristan on the daylight tablet just to kind of like see what that would be like. And it's very akin to the magical experience of watching Harry Potter. And it's, like that effect feels like magic in a way that I haven't been excited about other computers and gizmos in a long time, if that makes sense.
Wow. Well, thank you for reflecting that.
I showed it to a few other people as well, like a touring musician who's a great friend of mine came in town and they were playing this big gig. And I set him up with some blue blocking glasses, which he wore that night. And he was kind of tinkering around with the daylight computer that day. And he's just like, man, this is different. This feels like something that I could actually use in my art, in my creativity. And for a lot of us, we've really had to wrestle with that for a long time because it wasn't always that way. When I was a kid, and for people who have been in the creative domains for a long time, those old school amplifiers, for example, used to have tubes in them, old school displays as well, and even computers and things like that. They weren't so disruptive. It kind of crept up on us over time. And I don't remember which generation it was, but when I've had Apple laptops since I was in college, and loved the old ones. And then at some point, I started hating them a little bit more with each innovation. And I've heard you speak about this as well, where when you were designing your tablet and the display, you went back in time to look at technology that had been there before, but not quite perfected. And then you worked on that to bring that into the future. And it seems like that is a wonderful way to do it because, the technology in the 90s and the 2000s and the displays and that sort of thing, they weren't so disruptive to our biology back in the day. And they don't have to be now either, especially that we're at the point when I first heard you talking about the tablet, you're just like, yeah, it's going to be heavier and it's going to be a little bit um, less sexy than Apple. And it's like I was expecting something that was going to be humongous and super heavy and terrible with no battery life and no function, really slow. And for me, we've had a bunch of Android tablets, Apple tablets, and things like that. And I never use the speed that they supposedly have. I never reached that point. Everything that your tablet has been able to run pretty much perfectly fine, aside from the Google suite and modern social media devices, which I haven't installed on there because I don't want it to kind of like destroy my attention and focus.
Um, this is a tablet. I'm using it. I just thought of like an ad idea based on what you're saying. Do you know like the Apple would do ads with Johnny Ive where he would talk about like how it's like aluminium aircraft grade aluminium and
Right,
it's
right.
4.2 million and like everything would be like how thin and light and so on. I just imagine like we get somebody with a British accent and the video starts with an iPad and then they keep progressively. They're like, we like in the same British accent. They're like, we made it fatter because we decided a thick boy
Yeah.
is a better boy. And then we like he adds bezels to it because we're like, get your greasy fingers off the screen. And the whole thing is quote unquote making the thing worse, but he's like selling it hard. That it's like fatter and like heavier, and the bezels are bigger. And he's like, we removed color, so you get the best color, no color. Or I don't know, just and it ends with boy, the new and improved iPad that does way less for more money. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it could work. I would buy that.
In a way, like what we're more than engineers at Daylight. I feel like the core North Star of the company is like being scientists, being product people and scientists. I think one of the fun things is to actually experiment with communication. I think companies have gotten so boring. Like, how do you like, what does it mean to like be real or edgy, or call out people or explain science? Like, don't pander, and I would love to learn from you of like, how do you meet people where they are, but not pander to them? Especially since a lot of this is working backwards from the best of science has to offer or psychology.
Yeah, well, it seems to me, in a way, if you wear blue light glasses, for example, you're putting up your shields to the dangers of modern devices. You are trying to fight what's coming in technology by going back to the past and kind of taking features away, if that makes sense. And I've heard you speak about this in at least one other interview, where uh, where things are going in terms of AI and the ability of these tech behemoths to follow us around and kind of weaponize AI against us to advertise um, more effectively, to manipulate us a little more, to spend more time on their platforms or on their machines. It seems like this is the perfect timing to start embracing technology that doesn't allow that to happen. It takes away that seductive aspect. It takes away the ability of a lot of these tech behemoths to track you by virtue of the fact that you can't or you won't install certain apps on the device, or it's not running a certain OS that allows that all to happen. And it, yeah, like I just said, the timing is perfect for people to start realizing that they need this based upon where we're about to go. Because when it comes to $1 billion AI that is manipulating us perfectly, knowing exactly who we are based on all of these data points, we are completely outgunned. We're completely outmatched. We already are. We have been for a few years. That's kind of why we're in the pickle we're in. So it's important to embrace this right now so that we can take our sovereignty back and our freedom back, hopefully, in the use of technology and bring our technology forward into a future that's better than the dystopia they're trying to build for us.
There's a great quote that's like, Gary Kasparov was the best chess player in the world with like a 150 IQ, and he lost to $1 billion AI, Deep Blue, in chess. How is your average person now competing with $1 trillion AI who doesn't even know they're in a game going to win. Because that's what the Facebook algorithm or the TikTok algorithm, the YouTube algorithms, it's $1 trillion AI that is fighting you, and you don't even realize you're in a game with it. How can you ever win that game? And that to me is the true calling of making computers better now, is the misalignment between you and digital technologies has the potential to be more profoundly negative than any time before, because they are so powerful with AI and things like that. And so, do you trust a public company like Apple that is trying to grow their services revenue and their 30% app store cut, and tell shareholders that, hey, we're not a hardware company, we're a software company, and give us a 30x multiple? Like, I think there's a lot of banality of evil that comes from the way public markets work today for stocks. And so, yeah, I think the need for a computer to be aligned with you, to protect you from kind of malevolent AIs and all this extraction in the attention economy, is more necessary than ever before. And I hope that we get the business model right, we get the funding model right, we need to get the right investors or long-term oriented, such that we can not have the same incentives. Like, one of the things we're exploring is potentially doing a membership model like Costco, where Costco basically makes no money on anything. It's essentially a nonprofit, and the only way they survive is that membership fee they charge everybody is what pays for all the salaries of all the Costco employees. It's the quote unquote profit. Otherwise, everything that you see there is like just the cost of the thing plus a 15% markup, enough to just cover overhead. And so I've been thinking about something similar, where like Costco is a for-profit business, but you could argue a little bit tongue-in-cheek that it is the most effective charity in America at creating the most amount of good and has the greatest amount of sustainability, and it's not begging for donations. So I've been curious, like, if we want to not force you to use our Google Drive or our iCloud, or force you into some thing that we can charge you $3 a month here and there and that, and we're trying to overcharge you on the hardware. Like, what if on everything we just did the Costco style 15% markup, or maybe in technology it has to be 30, something like that. And instead that just covers the operations. And if we could make a 70% markup, we'll still do 30, because the goal is to ultimately keep giving back to people, right? And we just charge a quote unquote like daylight membership fee, where in return for paying that membership fee, we will do right on everything else. So that's open sourcing software, removing all tracking and this and that. And you could argue a lot of smart people would be like, that's stupid. People would never pay your membership fee. But I'm absolutely intrigued by the idea of, hey, if you keep us alive through this membership fee, we will promise on every decision we make it's as pro-social as possible. So this is a new idea for us. We've been thinking about it for years, but it's really come to the fro. And we're trying to not just have good intentions, but also this kind of business model and funding model innovation allow us to do more good.
Yeah, I love that you folks are innovating with the technology itself as well as business models, because you kind of need to do both right now. The business models are sick and broken. The devices are making us sick and broken. And there's certainly room for innovation. And I think you're going to get a lot of people on board by just having a different way of going about all of this, because we don't we don't want dystopia. We want a utopian future if we have the option, or at least we want the one that's trending a little bit better and using these advances in technology and thinking innovation to actually improve the human experience, especially for the next generation. And we'll have to have you back on, because we didn't even talk about basically what's at stake for children and the next generation coming, when they're using iPads compared to using your technology. It's a fundamentally different thing and so important. And I know you got to roll in a little bit, but what would you like to say to listeners before we go? What's the best place to find Daylight Computer? Now that we're skipping ahead to the future a little bit, because this will be out in a few weeks, and I think you'll be just about launched, if not already launched by then.
Yeah, we're launching on May 23rd. I don't know when this is coming out. But basically, if it's after May 23rd, you can go to daylightcomputer.com, and you can order the tablet. You can think of it as a healthier iPad. And as Abel was saying, comes with a stylus. You can attach a keyboard to it and do Google Docs on it and stuff. You can wire it with Ethernet, so you don't even have EMFs and things. There's a variety of ways to use it. If it's before May 23rd, you can still go to daylightcomputer.com, and you can sign up for a waiting list. And if you want to be one of the first people and you want to secure your spot online, you can put $100 totally refundable deposit. Um, down for it. And so that's the best way to support us. And also, you know, if you have a great experience with the product, I'll let people know on Twitter. Like, we don't have much money for marketing. We're trying to put as much as possible into the product. So it's only through word of mouth of people liking what we're doing. And it's not perfect. So even feedback on how we can improve it is a key way to be able to be helpful. And we were looking for always new designers and engineers to join the team. If you're interested in making apps, if you're interested in modifying an Android operating system, we're always looking designers, graphic designers, copywriters. We have a lot of copy that we need to do. So there's a lot of roles on the team that it could be helpful with. And always aligned investors, people who really believe in humane tech. Like you're saying, maybe we can come back again, but want a better computer for their child. Want a healthier computer. We're looking for folks who align that way.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for doing the work you're doing, Anjan. And you got a super fan here. So I look forward to having you back on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Super appreciate you.